I'm Zoe Bentley, and welcome to Exogeology Rocks, Episode 6. I'm here with Dr. Cynthia Phillips, who is a planetary geologist for SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Cynthia, can you please tell us a bit about what you do?
Hi, and first, it's really great to be here today. So I'm a planetary geologist, which means that I study pictures of other planets. I usually use images that were taken by planetary spacecraft. So these are spacecraft that are in orbit around another planet or sometimes around another satellite. These spacecraft take pictures of the surfaces of these planets. And a lot of what I do is actually satellites. So I'll probably call them worlds. And world kind of covers both planet and satellite. So I don't get into trouble for calling Europa or something like that a planet. So I look at these images of these other worlds and I study them on my computer to tell what we can learn about the geology that's going on there.
Can you give us an example of a project you're doing right now?
Let's see. One of my favorite places in the solar system is Europa. Europa is a moon of Jupiter. It's covered with a thick icy layer at the top, and then we're pretty sure there's a big liquid ocean of liquid water that's underneath that icy layer. And so one of the things that I study is what's going on in that surface. Are there any current processes that are going on? Is there any current geologic activity? On Europa, so far we haven't found any, but I've also been studying other satellites in the outer solar system. One really cool satellite to study is Io. Io is a moon of Jupiter and it's really volcanically active. And so the cool thing about Io is that we can actually see changes taking place today on its surface. We can see new volcanoes erupting, we can see new lava flows happening on the surface, and so it's a dynamic and exciting place to study.
So when you're studying these things, what exactly are you doing? Can you tell us what a typical day is like for you?
Typical day is I get up and I get all my kids out the door to school and I fight traffic on the freeway and head off to work. Once I get to work, I'm basically looking at my computer. That's the thing that I do most of the day. And so it's the less exotic part of my job, but it's also really exciting because oftentimes I'll be looking at brand new pictures of the surface of one of these planets or satellites. And in some cases, I may not be the first person to see it, but I'm one of very few who have looked at these planets or satellites in detail. And that to me is really exciting.
What are some projects you've worked on in the past?
The project of looking for geologic activity on Europa has been one of my favorite ones that I've been working on for quite a while. I've also done some work with Mars. I've been studying these features called slope streaks. They're these dark, small features that form on the edges of either hills or craters on Mars. And again, what's cool about them is that we see them forming now. So we're basically we'll take a picture and we'll see some of these dark streaks, and then the spacecraft will go over maybe a couple months, maybe a year later, and we see new ones that have formed. And so this is very exciting, possibly because they could be associated with liquid water. And so if liquid water is required to form these, and if we see them being formed now, then that means that there must be liquid water fairly close to the surface right now. And that's really exciting for these Mars rovers that are currently driving around on Mars and all of our future ideas of exploration.
What are the best and worst parts of your job?
The best part has got to be getting to look at pictures. I'm a very visually oriented person, and so you'll hear me talking about the pictures. It's all about the pictures. I just get very excited combining together and merging images, maybe taken by different spacecraft, maybe taken at different times, maybe combining black and white images with color data that can tell us something about the composition. So I really like working with pictures. I also really like working with students. I run a couple of student internship programs that bring college students here to the SETI Institute. I have one that brings students here during the summer to do a 10-week internship, and then I have another one that brings students during the academic year to do a longer-term internship. And I really find it rewarding to work with students. That's one of my other favorite things to do.
What's one of the most exciting things you've done for your job?
That's got to be, I've had the privilege of working with the Galileo imaging team when I was in graduate school, and this was the team that was actually planning observations that would be taken with the Galileo spacecraft, which was in orbit around Jupiter at the time. And so I got to be one of the people who helped plan those observations. That was really cool. One of the most exciting and also harrowing things that I did was we didn't really have a very good map of Europa. So remember, Europa is my favorite place, so I have to bring it up as many times as possible. We didn't have a very good map of Europa from the previous spacecraft that had flown past the Voyager spacecraft, because it really only saw half of Europa at any kind of decent resolution. And so what happened was that we didn't really know where a lot of features were, especially down near the South Pole, where we didn't have very good pictures at all. And so we were planning an observation where we wanted to take a very high-resolution image of this feature, this long kind of ridge-like feature that was down near the South Pole of Europa. But we didn't have a very good idea of where exactly that feature was. And that was important because we didn't have that much room to take a very big picture. We couldn't just take pictures over the whole South Pole. We could only fit a couple very narrow frames that were supposed to be right over this long linear feature. And so I was a graduate student, and it turned out that I just, for fun, I'd been matching together all the pictures we'd taken, and I built up this map of the surface. It turned out that my map at that moment was better than any map that any of the official people had made.
Oh, wow.
So I was this lowly little student, and I made this map, and when the image planners found out about it, they said, oh, we want your map. So, well, but, I was just making it for fun. And they said, no, it's better than anything we have. So they took this map, and they used it to plan this observation. And so I was, really, really careful to do the best job I could with the map and make it the best I could before I gave it to them, but I was really worried. So they took this observation, and when it came back, I would just, I was biting my nails, waiting to see whether we actually got an image of the feature that we wanted. And so when I finally saw the images, there it was. We'd been off a little bit, but we were close enough that we got almost all the feature we wanted. And so that was probably one of the most nerve-wracking, but ultimately exciting things that I got to do.
That does sound exciting. So it sounds like something you did for fun turned out to be really useful after all.
It did.
That's really cool. So what's one of the funniest things that happened to you on your job?
So I have a couple kids, and so the kindergarten classes at our elementary school always study the moon. And so since I'm a planetary scientist, I get called on to go and talk to these classes. And so what happened, the last time I went in, I actually went over to the NASA Lunar Science Institute, and they have this inflatable moon. So I asked to borrow a moon globe because I figured that the students would like to see, a 3D moon, right, rather than just pictures. So I sent my request over, and they said, yeah, sure, we have a moon globe, you can come by and borrow it. So I came over. It wasn't just a little moon globe that I was picturing, like a little 12-inch sort of desktop one. It was a giant moon, like this big, and it was inflatable and had this pump, and it was gigantic. And I wasn't going to say no. It was great. And so I told the teacher that I was going to be bringing a moon globe with me, and they were of course expecting a globe-sized moon globe. And so I showed up, and I had to deflate it slightly to get it just through the door, but then I inflated it and I was rolling it down the hall. And I came into the classroom, and one of the kids was actually scared. Remember, these are like little kindergartners, and she looked really, really scared when she saw this giant, because it was like 3 times as tall as she was. This giant moon was coming into her classroom, and so it was just watching the reaction of the kids to this giant moon was very funny. And I brought a bunch of my space toys too, and so I could act out the Apollo mission with the blasting off from their Earth, flying over the moon with the rover and the lander. So it was really fun. I like doing that.
So what is some advice you have for kids who want to get into planetary geology?
I guess my advice would be have fun with it. I was really hooked on doing planetary geology just from the pictures. I spent a lot of time just looking at pictures online, playing with them on the computer, and not just pictures of planets, pictures of anything. Some of the best training that I had actually was when I was a kid. My mother was a teacher, and so while she was finishing up teaching, I would go sit in the back of one of the resource rooms where there were computers, and this is, before everyone had iPhones in their pockets that were super powerful computers. And so I would go play on these computers, and they had this little drawing program that let you do pixel editing, where you can make these little patterns. And so I'd spend hours making these little tiny patterns, then try to fill in the whole thing and make them match up and tessellate interestingly and things like that. I was a weird kid. Okay, so that pixel level editing, that attention to detail, has actually turned out to be the most useful skill that I've brought to my work, because, like, for example, when I was making that map of Europa. That required me to match up a whole bunch of images seamlessly. And I did it, and I found it really fun. And this is just something I was working on for fun, but then it turned out to be really useful. So I guess my biggest piece of advice would be find something that you enjoy. Find something that's really fun, and maybe they'll actually pay you to do it one day.
Well, thank you very much for talking with us today.
That's great. It's been really fun. Thank you.
So, this has been Exogeology Rocks, episode 6. Thanks for watching.